Hey guys, Tim Waz over here at Grounded Running in Beaufort, South Carolina. So this morning we talked about the importance of foot strike. Now we're going to turn it over to Kevin Purvis with Revo PT out in Boulder, Colorado. And Kevin's going to take us through some strengthening exercises to make sure that we're really honing in on getting that center of gravity over the foot and kind of bringing that stride back underneath ourselves to be a much more efficient runner. So Kevin, go ahead and take it away, bud.
Hi, I'm Kevin with Revo PT in Boulder, Colorado, bringing you a few tips to go along with Tim's discussion for Good Form Friday, looking at your run form and looking at foot strike. So what we want to think about is less about the part of your foot you're landing on and more so where that foot lands relative to your hips. So some people are going to be natural rear foot strikers, some will be midfoot, and some will be forefoot. Whatever your natural self-selection is, it's probably good to work on a whole lot of other things with your mechanics before you ever start debating whether you should play with where you land on your foot. So if we land way out in front, the time it takes the hip to line up over the ankle, we're going through a lot of deceleration and there's a lot of stress that's coming up into the body. So ankle, shin, knees, hips, a whole lot of bad things can go on. What we want is a very short window of time from ground contact to the hip passing over your stance foot. That's going to make you a more efficient runner and it's going to reduce your risk of injury. Now, one big correlation I found with overstriding or getting that foot too far out in front is tight hip flexors or lack of hip mobility. So what we need to do, and in a good healthy hip, we should be able to extend 13 to 15 degrees. If we can't do that, there's something called the stretch reflex that once the hip clears back, that tissue goes on stretch, and then we're going to reflexively bring the leg forward. So if you can't clear the proper range, that will engage a little bit sooner. You're also going to end up dumping the pelvis forward, and that can shoot the foot out, and all of a sudden we end up overstriding. And overstriding, whether you're a forefoot striker or a rear foot striker, is going to be bad news. So I want to give you a few ways to mobilize your hip, get a little more hip extension, and it'll clear out a little bit better when you go through your run. So before a run, we want to do something more in the active or dynamic range. So we don't want to get that tissue to calm down and go to sleep because we need it to go out and run. So a couple variations. One is a simple step back lunge. Make sure your pelvis stays nice and level. Don't go into a forward or anterior pelvic tilt. Keep that rear tucked under. And then back up. So you could just go 4 or 5 on each side. You can also use a mountain climber, which is also going to wake up your abdominal muscles. Once I bring the foot up, sinking the hip down, so I'm stretching out that right hip flexor, alternate back and forth until you've done 4 or 5 for each side. Now if this isn't right before a run, say you're going into a gym session, I'm a big fan of using sliders where we take that muscle into a lengthened position, but we're also turning it on, making it active, and it's going to learn that new position is a better one. So with your foot and knee on a slider, we're going to start with whatever your range of motion is, fire that glute, send the slider back, maintain a nice tight position through the midsection, and then we're going to bring the leg forward using your hip flexor, but no further than even with your body. Slide it back and pull it forward. So you can go through a series of about 10 of those. That's a pretty nifty way to tap into the nervous system so that we can retrain that range of motion. Now when you finish a run, or outside of getting ready to go be active with that hip flexor, you can go through some passive mobility techniques. And a couple of good ones are, for the hip flexor, we can go into your half kneeling position, tight gut, tight butt, and then move forward. You'll feel that pull high up into the hip. Now something else we need to work on is getting that knee bent. If you can reach back and grab it, that'd be fantastic. Or you can use something like a bench, or at home this could be a couch. So we're going to hook the foot. My goal is getting that butt and heel together. So we're trying to get to that point where we can fully fold the knee when the leg is in a neutral position. Now with these passive stretches, and particularly if you have very tight hip flexors, if you sit a lot, if you cycle a lot, those muscles are just going to shorten because they're always being held in a shortened position. So you need to hold this stretch for a minimum of 1 minute. Now that could be held up towards 5 minutes depending on your level of mobility. So work on some active techniques to get ready to go run. Use some passive techniques afterwards so you can get that tissue to calm down. You're going to improve your hip function, which most likely is going to aid in bringing that foot strike back under your hips. It's going to make you a more efficient runner and a more injury resistant runner.